If you have type 2 diabetes or prediabetes, four separate meta-analyses of human clinical trials now confirm that one low glycemic index vegetable lowers fasting blood glucose by up to 33 milligrams per deciliter, and that functional food is okra. Generations of families across Africa, India, and the Middle East have used it to manage blood sugar spikes. It costs less than $1 a day, and almost nobody in mainstream medicine is talking about it. What we are covering today is exactly what the published research shows okra does to blood sugar and insulin resistance. We are looking at the specific compounds inside this vegetable, how they work, and what a month of okra costs compared to the diabetes medications that millions of Americans are currently paying for. And then we are going to ask a question that deserves an honest answer, because if the evidence is this strong, why has it taken so long for anyone to pay attention? Before anything else, I want to be completely upfront. Okra does not replace your medication. If you take metformin, insulin, or any other prescription for diabetes, keep taking it. What we are examining today is what the science actually shows and whether adding this vegetable to your diet could safely support what you are already doing. One critical safety concern between okra and metformin needs immediate attention. They can interact in a way that reduces metformin's effectiveness, so we'll cover the exact timing you need to know. Please stay with me until we get to the complete safety section. Let us start with why this matters to you personally. 40.1 million Americans currently live with diabetes, which represents 12% of the entire population. On top of that number, 115.2 million American adults have prediabetes, meaning more than 2 in 5 adults are walking around with blood sugar levels that have already climbed dangerously high but have not crossed the threshold for a formal diagnosis. For anyone over 60, the numbers hit harder. 1 in 3 seniors aged 65 and older has diabetes, a rate of 28.8%. Another 52.1% of that same age group has prediabetes. Add those figures together, and roughly 4 out of every 5 American seniors are dealing with either diabetes or prediabetes right now. The financial weight is enormous. A report published in Diabetes Care in January 2024 put the total estimated cost of diabetes in the United States at $412.9 billion for the year 2022 alone. That figure breaks into $306.6 billion in direct medical costs and $106.3 billion in lost productivity, disability, and premature death. 1 in 4 U.S. healthcare dollars now goes to diabetes, and a person carrying a diabetes diagnosis averages $19,736 a year in medical expenses, which runs 2.6 times higher than someone without the disease. A November 2024 CDC data brief confirmed what the numbers already suggested, that a significant increasing linear trend for diabetes has stretched unbroken from 1999 through 2023. This problem is not shrinking. Year after year it grows, and the question we should all be asking is whether we are looking at every tool available to fight it. Let us get into the evidence. And I want to be careful here because a lot of exaggeration about okra and diabetes floats around the internet. What follows comes from actual published studies in peer-reviewed medical journals, with real patients and proper controls. The largest and longest clinical trial to date appeared in 2023 in Acta Diabetologica, led by Tavakoli and colleagues. 100 type 2 diabetes patients aged 40 to 60 enrolled in a double-blind, placebo-controlled randomized trial conducted in Iran. Each patient took 1,000 milligrams of okra fruit capsules 3 times a day for 12 weeks while continuing their standard diabetes medications. Fasting blood glucose dropped significantly, and so did hemoglobin A1C, total cholesterol, triglycerides, and C-reactive protein, all compared to the placebo group, with no adverse effects reported. Muradi and colleagues published another well-designed trial in phytotherapy research in 2020. 60 type 2 diabetes patients consumed 10 grams of okra powder mixed into yogurt twice daily for 8 weeks, and the separation between groups told a clear story. Fasting blood glucose fell by 15.61 milligrams per deciliter in the okra group versus just 3.40 in the controls. HOMA-IR, the standard measure of insulin resistance, decreased by 1.17 compared to 0.14. Triglycerides, total cholesterol, and LDL cholesterol all came down as well. The largest single trial by participant count, 120 type 2 diabetes patients, came from Sachi and colleagues, published in Phytotherapy Research in 2022. Participants took 1,000 milligrams of whole fruit okra capsules every 6 hours for 8 weeks, And fasting blood sugar, postprandial glucose, and hemoglobin A1C all decrease significantly compared to placebo. And this is where the picture becomes especially compelling. Between 2023 and 2025, 4 separate meta-analyses appeared, each pooling data from multiple clinical trials to examine the overall pattern. Fan and colleagues produced the most recent and rigorous of these in 2025, published in Phytotherapy Research. Analyzing 6 randomized controlled trials, they found okra reduced fasting blood glucose by 21.72 milligrams per deciliter and hemoglobin A1C by 0.42%, with both results reaching statistical significance. 521 participants across 8 randomized controlled trials formed the basis for Zhang and colleagues, who published in Food Science and Nutrition in 2024. Their numbers showed fasting blood glucose dropping by 32.56 milligrams per deciliter and A1C falling by 0.48%. Bahari and colleagues, publishing in Frontiers in Nutrition in 2024, reviewed 9 randomized controlled trials covering 540 participants and confirmed that okra reduced fasting blood glucose, A1C, LDL cholesterol, and total cholesterol. A subgroup analysis revealed the strongest effects in studies using doses of 3,000 milligrams per day or less, with durations longer than 8 weeks. To frame that A1C reduction, a drop of 0.4 to 0.5% falls within the range of what some prescription medications achieve. That result came from a vegetable. How okra actually works inside your body. What separates okra from simply eating more vegetables in general comes down to its chemistry. A very specific set of bioactive compounds operates through multiple pathways to affect blood sugar, and researchers have spent over a decade pinpointing each one and mapping how it functions. Start with the mucilage, that distinctive slimy texture okra is famous for. That slime is actually a complex polysaccharide called rhamnogalacturonan, built from galactose, rhamnose, galacturonic acid, and arabinose. This soluble fiber and pectin-rich matrix forms a gel-like structure inside your intestines that physically slows the rate at which glucose passes into your bloodstream, preventing blood sugar spikes. Think of it as a speed bump for sugar. Instead of glucose flooding your blood all at once after a meal, it enters gradually, which means your blood sugar avoids that sharp postprandial glucose spike. But the mucilage goes further than slowing absorption. Research published in Molecules in 2019 by Liao and colleagues demonstrated that okra polysaccharides activate the PI3K-AKT pathway and trigger NRF2 translocation. In plain language, that means okra switches on your cell's internal antioxidant defense systems, boosts production of protective enzymes like SOD2 and catalase, and improves how your liver stores glycogen. These polysaccharides also help relieve mitochondrial dysfunction, which is damage to the energy-producing parts of your cells closely linked to insulin resistance. The second major group of compounds involves flavonoids concentrated in okra seeds and fruit. A landmark finding published in Natural Product Communications in 2013 by Thanakosai and Fua-Price-Sirison identified alpha-glucosidase inhibitors in okra seeds. Alpha-glucosidase is an enzyme in your intestines that breaks down complex carbohydrates into simple sugars, and when you block this enzyme, less sugar gets released from your food. That mechanism mirrors exactly what the prescription diabetes drug acarbose does. The specific compound, isoquercitrin, tested 6 to 10 times more potent than the other major okra flavonoid, quercetin 3-O-gentiobioside. The third mechanism connects okra to a billion-dollar class of diabetes drugs. A research team led by Huang in Taiwan published a series of studies from 2017 through 2023 demonstrating that okra subfractions inhibit an enzyme called DPP4. That name carries weight because DPP4 inhibitors represent an entire category of diabetes medications, including sitagliptin, sold under the brand name Januvia. Okra compounds reduced insulin resistance markers, protected beta cells in the pancreas from damage, and curbed fat production in the liver. 3 distinct mechanisms, then, operate inside a single vegetable. The mucilage physically slows glucose absorption. The flavonoids block the enzyme that converts carbohydrates to sugar. And the bioactive fractions inhibit DPP4 in a way that echoes a prescription drug. That combination is genuinely unusual for any food, let alone one that costs a few dollars a pound. Let us talk about money, because this is where the contrast becomes impossible to look away from. Fresh okra runs approximately $2.50 to $4 per pound across the United States, shifting with region and season. Frozen okra sits at about $2 to $3.50 per bag and stays available year-round at every major grocery chain. A reasonable daily serving, roughly half a cup cooked, works out to between $14 and $22 per month. Line that up against what Americans pay for diabetes medications. Generic metformin runs $9 to $30 per month without insurance, which is quite affordable, and metformin remains a first-line medication for good reason. But if your doctor has prescribed a GLP-1 receptor agonist like Ozempic, the list price lands between $935 and $997 per month. Mounjaro exceeds $1,000 monthly at list price. Even with insurance, copays for these medications can stretch from $25 to $150 per month. $13.89 billion in global sales is what Ozempic alone generated in 2024. Novo Nordisk, the company behind Ozempic, reported total revenue of $40.5 billion that year and commands 55% of the global GLP-1 market. The total U.S. diabetes drug market carried an estimated value of $25 to $34 billion in 2024. $14 to $22 a month for daily okra. Close to $1,000 a month for Ozempic without insurance. I am not claiming okra replaces Ozempic, but that cost gap raises a fair question about why more research money has not flowed into something this affordable. Why was this buried, the structural barriers? The answer is not a simple conspiracy. What we are looking at is a set of structural barriers woven into how medical research gets funded, how doctors get trained, and how dietary guidelines get written. Every single one of these barriers is well documented. The first barrier is that you cannot patent a vegetable. Under U.S. patent law, reinforced by the 2013 Supreme Court decision in Association for Molecular Pathology versus Myriad Genetics, naturally occurring substances cannot receive patent protection. Without that protection, no pharmaceutical company can justify spending the $1 to $2 billion typically required to push a treatment through Phase 3 clinical trials and FDA approval. No financial mechanism exists for recouping that investment on okra. That is not a conspiracy. That is how the system channels money. Investment flows toward patentable molecules because that is where the return lies. The second barrier is that nutrition research operates on a starvation budget. Approximately 5% of the total NIH budget goes to nutrition research, which amounts to about $2.2 billion of roughly $47.7 billion in fiscal year 2023. Only about 1.3%, roughly $500 million, targets diet specifically in the prevention or treatment of disease in humans. The NIH's own internal analysis identified nutrition as carrying the largest gap between research funding and actual health burden. And here's a telling detail. The National Cancer Institute's nutrition funding actually shrank even as total NCI funding climbed 19% between 2013 and 2018. That funding reality explains why every okra clinical trial we covered today enrolled between 30 and 120 patients and ran for 2 to 12 weeks. Small budgets produce small trials. Compare that to pharmaceutical studies enrolling thousands of patients over years. Okra's evidence is not limited because okra fails to work. It is limited because nobody writes the check for the large-scale trials that would prove it beyond doubt. The third barrier sits inside medical schools. Approximately 19.6 hours of nutrition education is what the average U.S. medical student receives across 4 years of training, which amounts to less than 1% of total lecture hours. Only 27% of U.S. medical schools meet the minimum 25 hours recommended by the National Academy of Sciences, a standard set back in 1985. A 2023 survey of over 1,000 U.S. medical students found that roughly 58% reported receiving no formal nutrition education at all. 86% of internal medicine interns, according to the American Society for Nutrition, felt inadequately trained to provide nutritional counseling. A small shift may be coming. In March 2025, the Department of Health and Human Services announced that 53 medical schools committed to requiring at least 40 hours of nutrition education starting in fall 2026. That change has not taken effect yet, and getting to this point took decades. The fourth barrier involves the pace of dietary guidelines. Federal law mandates that the dietary guidelines for Americans update only every 5 years, and the National Academies of Sciences noted in 2017 that each update cycle includes roughly 2 years of relative inactivity. Consider how long some changes have taken. Dietary cholesterol sat on the list as a nutrient of concern from 1980 all the way until 2015, decades after accumulating evidence showed its effect on blood cholesterol had been overstated. Specific limits on added sugar did not appear until 2015 either. A peer-reviewed study in Public Health Nutrition found that 95% of the 2020 Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee members carried conflicts of interest with food or pharmaceutical industries. For the 2025 committee, U.S. Right to Know identified 9 of 20 members with financial ties to food, pharmaceutical, or related industries, including connections to Novo Nordisk and Eli Lilly. The fifth barrier is a systematic skepticism toward traditional medicine. Okra has been used to manage blood sugar in Turkey, India, Nigeria, Bangladesh, and throughout the Caribbean for generations. But the randomized controlled trial framework used in Western medicine fits poorly when evaluating whole foods with multiple bioactive compounds, variable preparation methods, and non-standardized doses. The World Health Organization itself has acknowledged that global attention, both financial and in human resources, remains insufficient to advance the science behind traditional medicine. And yet history keeps validating traditional knowledge. A WHO study found that 80% of 122 plant-derived pharmaceutical compounds traced back to their original folk medicine uses. One particular irony deserves mention here. Metformin, the most widely prescribed diabetes drug on the planet, was derived from compounds found in French lilac, a traditional European herbal remedy for diabetes. I promised you an evidence-based video, which means giving you the other side as well, because not everything about okra and diabetes qualifies as settled science. The evidence base remains small. We are talking about 6 to 10 randomized controlled trials with a total of roughly 330 to 540 participants, most of which ran for 2 to 12 weeks. Evidence quality ratings land at very low to low for most outcomes. Every single trial took place in Iran, China, or Indonesia, with none conducted in the United States or Europe. And not every trial produced positive results. A well-designed double-blind trial published in 2025 in Advances in Integrative Medicine by Hessamzadeh and colleagues studied 53 type 2 diabetes patients over 60 days and found that hemoglobin A1C and fasting blood sugar remained unchanged. Most metabolic markers showed no improvement. That trial stands as a genuine counterpoint to the positive findings. No studies have measured hard endpoints like cardiovascular events or mortality either. Blood sugar reductions across the positive trials are real and statistically significant, but whether those improvements translate into fewer heart attacks, strokes, or deaths over the long term remains unanswered. Some of the benefits may also reflect the simple fact that okra is a high-fiber vegetable. Its soluble fiber content is exceptional, but that means some of what it accomplishes may not be unique to okra, since many high-fiber foods support glucose management. The specific claim in this video's title, that okra reverses insulin resistance in 21 days, also needs to be addressed head-on. No published human clinical study has used an exactly 21-day time frame. The shortest positive human studies lasted 2 weeks and 4 weeks. One animal study from 2021 tested okra extracts in diabetic mice for 3 weeks and observed blood glucose reductions, but that was a mouse study, not a human one. The 21-day claim circulating on social media lacks support from published human evidence, and I wanted to say that directly rather than let it go unchallenged. Before we get to how people actually use okra, one safety issue demands attention, especially for anyone taking metformin. Cotton and colleagues published a study in ISRN Pharmaceutics in 2011 showing that the water-soluble fraction of okra caused a near-complete loss of metformin's blood sugar-lowering effect in diabetic rats. When metformin was given alone, blood glucose dropped dramatically from 32 to about 15 millimoles per liter. But when metformin was given alongside okra, blood glucose barely moved, going from 33.5 to 32.2. The mechanism turned out to be physical, with amine groups on metformin binding to carboxyl groups in okra's mucilage, essentially trapping the drug so it could not be absorbed through the intestines. Human confirmation of this interaction does not yet exist, but multiple review articles, including one published in 2025 in Food Production, Processing, and Nutrition, recommend separating okra and metformin by at least 2 to 3 hours. Do not take your metformin and eat okra at the same meal. Take your medication first, wait 2 to 3 hours, and then have your okra. Your doctor may not be aware of this interaction, so please raise it at your next appointment. For those on blood thinners, okra contains moderate amounts of vitamin K at about 31 to 44 micrograms per serving, which falls well below dark leafy greens like kale or spinach. The American Heart Association classifies cooked okra as low in vitamin K on its warfarin guidance. If you take warfarin, just keep your okra intake consistent from week to week. Newer blood thinners like Eliquis, Xarelto, and Pradaxa are not affected by dietary vitamin K. Kidney stones present another consideration. Okra qualifies as a high oxalate food, containing approximately 56 to 140 milligrams per 100 grams, so anyone with a history of calcium oxalate kidney stones should limit their intake and consult their provider. Okra also contains fructans, a type of FODMAP that can trigger gas, bloating, or diarrhea in people with irritable bowel syndrome. If that applies to you, introduce okra gradually and see how your body responds. Different cultures have been preparing okra specifically for blood sugar management for generations, and several of these traditions align closely with what the clinical trials actually tested. The most widespread method is okra water. You take 3 to 5 fresh pods, wash them, trim the ends, slice them lengthwise, and soak them in 8 to 12 ounces of water in a glass container overnight for about 8 to 12 hours. In the morning, you strain out the pods and drink the water on an empty stomach. Families across Nigeria, India, the Caribbean, Bangladesh, and Indonesia have relied on this practice. Most of the clinical trials were conducted in Iran, where okra powder served as the primary preparation. Pods are dried, ground into a fine powder, and consumed at 5 to 10 grams, about 1 to 2 teaspoons, mixed into warm water, buttermilk, or yogurt once or twice daily. The Marathi 2020 clinical trial used exactly this method, with 10 grams of okra powder in yogurt per day. Roasted okra seed tea carries a long tradition in Turkey and Nigeria. Seeds are separated from the pods, lightly roasted until golden brown, and steeped in hot water. This preparation targets the flavonoid-rich seed fraction, where those alpha-glucosidase inhibitors, isoquercetin and quercetin 3-O-gentiobioside, concentrate. One cultural detail worth sharing is that the word gumbo, the name of the famous southern stew, derives from West African words for okra. Okra came to the Americas through the transatlantic slave trade, and the traditions of cooking okra in soups and stews for health persisted in southern U.S. food culture across centuries. Here's a quick look at what you actually get in a serving of okra. Because the nutritional profile packs a lot into just 33 calories per 100 grams. 100 grams of raw okra delivers 3.2 grams of fiber, and what sets okra apart is that approximately half of that fiber is soluble, in the form of those mucilaginous polysaccharides we covered earlier. That soluble to insoluble ratio runs exceptionally high compared to most vegetables. The same serving provides 23 milligrams of vitamin C at 26% of your daily value, 31 micrograms of vitamin K also at 26%, 60 micrograms of folate at 15%, 57 milligrams of magnesium at 14%, and 0.79 milligrams of manganese at 34% of your daily value, which ranks among the highest of any common vegetable. Okra's glycemic index sits at an estimated 20 to 35, placing it firmly in the low category. Glycemic load comes in at approximately 1.4 to 2.6 per 100 gram serving, which is among the lowest of any food you can eat. Compared to other vegetables commonly recommended for people with diabetes, like broccoli, spinach, or cauliflower, okra stands apart because of that unique mucilaginous soluble fiber that physically slows glucose absorption, its exceptional manganese and magnesium content, and those specific alpha-glucosidase inhibiting flavonoids. Most vegetables offer one of those benefits, while okra brings all three to the same plate. Let us bring this together and lay out what we actually know. Okra contains a genuinely distinctive combination of bioactive compounds, including mucilaginous rhamnogalacturonan polysaccharides, alpha-glucosidase inhibiting flavonoids, and DPP-4 inhibiting fractions, all operating through verified mechanisms. 4 meta-analyses of human clinical trials confirm statistically significant reductions in fasting blood glucose, between 15 and 33 milligrams per deciliter, along with A1C reductions of 0.42 to 0.48%. A month of daily okra costs roughly $14 to $22. The evidence, while real, is still preliminary. Trials remain small, not all of them produced positive results, none have been conducted in the United States, and the 21-day reversal claim specifically has no direct human evidence behind it. The structural reasons this research has not reached your doctor's office are thoroughly documented. Unpatentable foods attract no pharmaceutical investment. The NIH spends only 5% on nutrition research. Doctors receive 19 hours of nutrition training across 4 years of medical school, and dietary guidelines update on 5-year cycles with documented industry conflicts on the advisory committees. The American Diabetes Association puts it clearly. There is not one diet that works for everyone with diabetes, and medical nutrition therapy is the foundation of all diabetes management. Okra is not a miracle cure. What it is, though, is a nutritious and extraordinarily affordable vegetable with genuinely promising science behind it that deserves far more attention and far more research funding than it has received. If adding okra to your diet interests you, talk to your doctor first, especially if you take metformin. Remember to separate okra and metformin by at least 2 to 3 hours. Start with small amounts to gauge how your body responds, and keep taking your prescribed medications. If this information helped you, please subscribe to the channel and share this video with someone you care about who manages their blood sugar. Knowledge like this should not stay buried. It should be shared. As always, this video is for educational purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. Please consult your healthcare provider before making any changes to your diet or medication. I will see you in the next one, and take care of yourselves.